The Military Order of the World Wars is a national veteran service organization whose members are dedicated to sustain our great nation, its principles and opportunities. The members of the order personify the motto, "It is nobler to serve than to be served." Included among the order's initiatives are to promote and further patriotic education and leadership to our youth. High school-age students across the country participate in multi-day youth leadership conferences and single-day youth leadership seminars. The multi-day conferences emphasize patriotism, free enterprise, and leadership. Single-day seminars address leadership. The presentation you're about to see is an abbreviated leadership seminar presented virtually. It covers the principles of leadership as well as key principles for success in life. 3 presentations cover basic principles necessary not just to be a successful leader, but to be successful in life. The 3 presentations are how to be a great leader, the power of communication, coordination, cooperation, and principles of success for leadership in life. Take a minute and look over this. Notice the key words: educate, train, inspire, character, values, to duty, honor, and country. Just as the U.S. Army's mission is to educate, train, inspire, and develop character, so too do the Air Force, Naval, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marine academies have the same mission: to educate, train, and inspire men and women to become officers of character, motivated to lead. To this end, the academies list 7 subordinate goals, the first of which is communication. The qualities of character, knowledge, and skills, anticipate and respond, are also addressed in the series. The verbs communicate, coordinate, and cooperate are in many ways interdependent. They also have different connotations. The one thing the 3 have in common is they are all critical for teams to achieve success. Let's look at this brief clip that defines the differences between the 3. Communication is a process of exchanging and ensuring that information is received and properly understood. Boy, this guy can draw fast, can't he? Coordination is taking action with others to achieve a common goal. He's a little bit slower in drawing the arrows. Don't ask me why. Now, cooperation is working together to achieve a common purpose or benefit. In order for communication to be completed, 3 essential elements must exist. A message must be sent, the message must be received, and the message must be understood. If I speak to you in a language that you do not understand, although I would have sent the message and you would have received it, you would not have understood it. Thus, effective communication has not occurred. Let's take a look at a brief clip that explains the communication cycle.
Today we're going to talk about the communication cycle, specifically the 8 different components that make it up. Sure, you may not have heard of the communication cycle before, but some of these components are going to seem pretty familiar. To begin, we always start with the sender, who has some kind of idea that he is trying to get to a receiver. So that begs the question, how does an idea get from the sender to the receiver? Well, that idea represents the 3rd component in the communication cycle, and that is the message, the idea being communicated. And for our sender here, well, he has a very specific idea in mind. He is in love, and he can't wait to communicate it. So now we arrive at our 4th component, which is the encoding phase. To encode is simply to package the message. And you really only have 3 different options. They are either verbal, nonverbal, or both. Our sender has decided that a love letter would be the best way to encode his message. This brings us to our fifth component, and that is the channel, which is simply defined as how the receiver takes in the message. Human beings have 5 channels. Think, what else do you have 5 of? If you guessed your 5 senses, you'd be right. Hearing, seeing, and feeling are the primary ways in which human beings take in information. And in this case, if it's a love letter, she will be using sight. Having taken in this message, she now needs to make sense of it. And another word for that is our next component, and that is to decode it. So if encoding is packaging your message, decoding is making sense of it. So, she's unpackaged the message. Now all we do is wait for her response. What do you think? Will she be into him? Okay, it looks like she is. And that response that she's giving right there, that's our next component. And that is the feedback loop. Any response the receiver gives to the sender. So there you have it, one effective cycle of communication. But wait, we're forgetting our final element, and that is noise, which is simply defined as anything complicating a message being sent or received. So if our sender has bad handwriting, our receiver can no longer decode his message. This, of course, alters her response and therein changes the feedback. So in the end, it seems miscommunication is just as much a part of this cycle. Thanks for watching.
Speak so others will listen. Listen so others will speak. To ensure that communication is effective, one must speak clearly and appropriately. Listen to understand and learn to know what the sender is trying to convey. Speak, listen, and learn. Let's take a closer look at the elements of communication and how they can sabotage or promote the communication cycle. Different forms of communication: face-to-face, voice-to-voice, written, and electronic. As we saw in the video clip, communication is expressed verbally as well as non-verbally. Nonverbal communication includes facial expressions and body language. Research on communication has revealed that most communication is expressed by nonverbal means, that is, by voice intonation or projection, and by what others see, that is, by face and body language. Less than 10% is by actual spoken words. The lesson learned here is the realization that we communicate not just by what we speak, but even more by tone of voice, facial expressions, and body movements. Words are powerful. What you say and how you say it determine success or failure, both in personal and professional life. How good are your communication skills? Are you sending and receiving accurately? Do you use words that promote effective communication? Do your words, tone, and body language send a message that can be misinterpreted and misunderstood by the other person? Are the words you use communicating what you really want to say? Just because you say something does not mean the receiver hears, understands, nor interprets your message the way you intended. Let's look at some ways that effective communication can be sabotaged.
Have you ever talked with a friend about a problem, only to realize that he just doesn't seem to grasp why the issue is so important to you? Have you ever presented an idea to a group, and it's met with utter confusion? Or maybe you've been in an argument when the other person suddenly accuses you of not listening to what they're saying at all. What's going on here? The answer is miscommunication, and in some form or another, we've all experienced it. It can lead to confusion, animosity, misunderstanding, or even crashing a multi-million-dollar probe into the surface of Mars. The fact is, even when face-to-face with another person, in the very same room, and speaking the same language, Human communication is incredibly complex. But the good news is that a basic understanding of what happens when we communicate can help us prevent miscommunication. For decades, researchers have asked what happens when we communicate. One interpretation, called the transmission model, views communication as a message that moves directly from one person to another, similar to someone tossing a ball and walking away. But in reality, this simplistic model doesn't account for communication's complexity. Enter the transactional model, which acknowledges the many added challenges of communicating. With this model, it's more accurate to think of communication between people as a game of catch. As we communicate our message, we receive feedback from the other party. Through the transaction, we create meaning together. But from this exchange, further complications arise. It's not like the Star Trek universe, where some characters can Vulcan mind meld, fully sharing thoughts and feelings. As humans, we can't help but send and receive messages through our own subjective lenses. When communicating, one person expresses her interpretation of a message, and the person she's communicating with hears his own interpretation of that message. Our perceptual filters continually shift meanings and interpretations. Remember that game of catch? Imagine it with a lump of clay. As each person touches it, they shape it to fit their own unique perceptions, based on any number of variables, like knowledge or past experience, age, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, or family background. Simultaneously, every person interprets the message they receive based on their relationship with the other person, and their unique understanding of the semantics and connotations of the exact words being used. They could also be distracted by other stimuli, such as traffic or a growling stomach. Even emotion might cloud their understanding. And by adding more people into a conversation, each with their own subjectivities, the complexity of communication grows exponentially. So as the lump of clay goes back and forth from one person to another, reworked, reshaped, and always changing, it's no wonder our messages sometimes turn into a mush of miscommunication. But luckily, there are some simple practices that can help us all navigate our daily interactions for better communication. 1. Recognize that passive hearing and active listening are not the same. Engage actively with the verbal and nonverbal feedback of others and adjust your message to facilitate greater understanding. 2. Listen with your eyes and ears, as well as with your gut. Remember that communication is more than just words. 3. Take time to understand as you try to be understood. In the rush to express ourselves, it's easy to forget that communication is a two-way street. Be open to what the other person might say. And finally, 4, be aware of your personal perceptual filters. Elements of your experience, including your culture, community, and family, influence how you see the world. Say, "This is how I see the problem, but how do you see it?" Don't assume that your perception is the objective truth. That'll help you work towards sharing a dialogue with others to reach a common understanding together.
Some barriers to effective communication: language, perception, information overload, inattention, time pressure, distraction and noise, emotion, organizational structure, poor retention. I will not take the time to go through each one of these individually, as it would add hours to this presentation, and we don't want that. Just suffice to know that there are many forces that can result in a person or group to whom you are trying to communicate just may not hear nor understand what you're trying to convey. So, how are some ways that you can minimize miscommunication and increase effective communication? When speaking, make your point brief, express clearly, seek feedback. One of the great motivators: listen. A basic human need is to be appreciated. When we listen to another, we are showing them we appreciate and care about what they are saying. When we listen carefully, we increase understanding, which in turn promotes mutual respect and leads to motivation. When listening, To increase the odds that you will hear and understand what others are attempting to communicate to you, use these techniques. Give full attention. That is, avoid distractions, think about other things, interrupting, be open-minded. Strive to understand what the other is saying. You do not need to agree, just understand. Watch body language and facial expressions. By so doing, you can pick up silent messages. Listen to main ideas and key points. These are the important points that the speaker is trying to convey. A few words of wisdom. Words that are whispered are better received than when yelled. When someone yells at you, do you remember what they said, or remember the tone of their voice? You cannot unsay a cruel word. If you want to hurt someone, call them a name or curse at them. But do not be fooled to think you got your point across, other than showing your anger. If you truly want to express an idea or thought, speak kindly to make others listen. Silence is sometimes the best answer. You cannot hear and listen when your mouth is moving. The boomerang effect. What you put out will come back to you. Negative equals negative. Positive equals positive. A universal truth. In fact, this is espoused by almost every religion, every philosophy in the world. If you give out negative, you will receive negative in return. Conversely, if you give out positive, you'll receive positive back. One may not know when or how, but it is so.